Welcome back. We're going to talk about websites today. And this is our project where we're going to introduce you to how you create a website using basic HTML and CSS. I'll explain what these are and how they affect a website. And then you'll use a template that you download to adjust some of the things in there and make the website that I give you your own. Kind of tweak some of those pieces. So I am on our course website under Design Fundamentals, Design or Web Design and Instructions. So a little way down the page, we get to number 2, download the HTML and CSS template. So I downloaded this and it's on my desktop as a zip file. So I'll double click on that to open it up. And in this folder, you have the files that we need for the website. There's an image folder, which houses all of the images that I use in the website. And you have an index file. That is your home page. And I have a couple of supporting HTML pages here. This one is going to show, well, to start with, I've demoed a photography website. So this looks like a portfolio website, and it shows all of my work. There are 3 pages in the portfolio. This is the first one, which is the index, and that will show my landscape portraits or photography. And this web page will show my portrait photography examples, and this web page will show my black and white examples. So whenever someone opens a website, it always goes to the index.html first. Now, in order to give all of this structure, I will use HTML coding, and then to make it look pretty, we'll use this main CSS file. The last file in here is just a typeface that I'm using on my website because I like that and prefer that website. So once you open this, we want to, or the folder, let's just take a look at the website first. And I'm going to take my index and I'm going to drag that onto my browser. I'm going to use Chrome. So this, I'm going to zoom out just a little bit. This is what the website looks like. It has a header, just like you read about in the Holy Grail website. It has a navigation, and the navigation has a link to these 3 pages. Now, landscape is going to be the index, so that's where it shows up. And as we scroll down, I have a headline in here telling everyone this is my landscape photography, and a little description. Here are several examples of my landscape photography. And then I have 9 examples of my photography. They're all set up in the same size boxes, and these are 1080 by 1080 pixels. You can see that I've left the first 2 on the home page as placeholders. So this reminds you that all your images should be 1080 by 1080, RGB, 72 pixels per inch, and then I save all of them as a web-friendly JPEG, which you've already done in this class out of Photoshop. Off to the side, I have what is called an aside here, and it has my photo, a welcome, short message, and then a link where they can click here and email me. At the very bottom, I have a footer, and that has 2 links. One goes to unsplash.com, where we get these photographs, another free photography website, pexels.com, and then I have a copyright line down here. So let's open up the HTML and CSS files and you'll see how the website is built. Let's go, we'll hide this. And to open these on a Mac, we really can't just double click these or drag them. We have to go into Text Edit. And if you don't see Text Edit in your bar on the bottom or in your dock, just go into Applications. And way down at the bottom under Text Edit, you'll be able to open that in your applications. So I already have mine open in Text Edit, And I'm going to open a new file. I'm going to go to my desktop to make sure that I'm in that tutorial website for Design Fundamentals folder. I'm going to select my index.html file. That's my home page. And I have to click under Options here and tell it to ignore the rich text commands. That will open this up without any styling, just as my raw HTML file that it is. So I'll click Open, and you will see, I'm going to open this up, you will see that this is all there is to, blow this up a little bit, this is all there is to the HTML code that builds that website. Now I'm going to go to File, Open again, and I'm going to choose that file main.css, tell it to ignore the rich text commands, open, and this will open my CSS file. Make this quite a bit larger so you can see. So the HTML is the building blocks. This tells it what things are in the website and builds them. Like if you look, the top part here, the head and the head, this holds things like the title of the website that shows up in the title of the page, a description for web browsers to use to say when we do a search or something, this shows up in there. While Google doesn't use these too often, I put keywords in here just to show you how to use them. So if someone does a search, this might link to the keywords. I have to tell my HTML file where to get the styling from the CSS page over here. So I've linked this style sheet, and you can see the name right here, very important. The href or hypertext reference here is the main.css. That's the exact name of this file. So it knows to pull in all of these kind of rules and guidelines to style these blocks in here. So you can see that's the head, and then here the body. Everything starts with an opening tag and a closing tag. Usually the only difference is this /. Inside of the body of my HTML, I have a header, opening, closing tag, and in here, basically it's saying here that I have a link, which would be the index, and that's my home page. The image source is my website header name logo, and that's the ping file that we're going to create. And then you always want to have an alt, just in case the image doesn't show up, text shows up in there. So I have it Craig Kuntz illustration. That should actually be Craig Kuntz photography. So I can just type right in here. Next, you see I have my navigation, and that's set up in what we call an unordered list and then a list inside of that. In here is where I have, in the navigation, it states photography styles, and then these are my 3 links here going to the landscape page, the portrait page, and the black and white page. Notice that the portrait goes directly to that portrait.html. Black and white goes to bw.html. And like I mentioned before, my home page is the landscape photography examples, so that links to index.html. So underneath my header and my nav, I have what's called a section. This big section holds the aside, which is where I have my photo right here. And then this is where I have welcome. My photo is right here, where I've named it just craig.jpg. And then I have my welcome, which is in bold. That's what these strong tags are on each side. And then I have I'm a photographer for hire, author, and graphic design teacher. And you'll notice that we start to see tags in here, like this P tag here and here. That's a paragraph tag. And that is controlled by, in the CSS, this P right here. So this P, when it's pulled into my HTML file through this link to the style sheet, tells whatever type is wrapped inside of this P tag to be, and in this case, my font family is pulling in Roboto Light. It's telling what size that type should be, the color, the line height. This is kind of like your leading. How I should align that, if it's centered, if it's left or right. And then I can put some margins and padding around it, which you'll learn a little bit more as you get into web design in your graphic design degree. And then here I have an anchor tag, which has that same hypertext reference or href that has mail to, and this goes to my email. There's a link, and then I have some type here that shows email me, and that's what shows up on the page. So that's my aside, and then I have my article. Now the article is the main content of the website. This has my H1, which is a headline 1. You'll see that's controlled over here in my CSS. Instead of a light typeface, I'm using a bold. Instead of it being 1.25 em, this measurement, it's a 2 em, so it's a little bit larger. The color's different. The text is still centered, and the padding and margins are adjusted a little bit. So in here you can see I have landscape photography at the top of the page. Here are several examples of my landscape photography. I hope you enjoy them. And then I have what's called another div class here. It's an art box container, and you'll get into that more when you get into web design as well, but this is basically a container or a division of the page that you'll see has all 9 of my images in here. It's pretty simple code. It tells me to use that art box, and the art box div class, if I go over to my CSS and I find that art box right here, this art box, you can see it's set up to have a height of 400 pixels, and this is a width of 400 pixels. And then I have a margin all the way around it of 2 ems, which is about the size of my type in there, and I've centered it in there. So that's what the art box is, and I use that over and over again so all my images are the same size. So in here you'll see that when we go to image source, it goes into that image folder like we showed before. Let me bounce back here. This is the image folder right here with all of my images in there. You can see I even have that placeholder image in here. And that is showing that in the first 2 positions, and then I start to get into all the rest. I have my landscape photographs here. My picture is in here as well, and my header name is in here too. So everything is in the images folder. So when I type with my HTML code, I put images first with a / and then image placeholder, that's the 1080 by 1080. And then again, in case this image doesn't display, I have an alt, which is Craig Kuntz Landscape Photography. I've used that for all of these. And you can see in here, once you have one line of text, one line of HTML code written, you can just copy and paste it and then just change this. This is the landscape 3, this is 4, 5, 6, and all the way down. So that's the main area that people are going to look at, the article. Then this closes my section, and then below I have a footer. And the footer you can see has that anchor tag again down here with the href, the hypertext reference going to unsplash.com. And then I have some text right here, unsplash.com. This is the Pexels link. And then lastly, there's just inside of this paragraph tag are these 2 links, and then my copyright, Craig Kuntz, all rights reserved. This closes my footer, and then my body ends, and then the HTML for the whole piece ends. So this is the entire website. Let's go back and take a look at that. So you can see here, this was my header, the blue background, and my image in there. My 3 links to the 3 different pages. This was that H1 headline. This is the paragraph. And then these are all of my image placeholders. And this is my aside that has my photo, the email link, and my kind of welcome paragraph. And then down below, you can also see like the 2 ems of space I have around everything. So if there's 2 ems of space around, in this case margin, around every photograph, there's 2 here and 2 here for a total of 4. 2 here, 2 here, a total of 4. And then at the bottom in my footer, I've styled that with the same blue color, and then I have my links down here. So that is the basics of what your HTML and CSS file looks like to build this website. One other thing that's kind of cool is down at the very bottom of my CSS, I've used what are called media queries, and I just have 2 simple media queries. And what this does is it basically detects when my screen gets larger than 1280 pixels. I chose 1280 because I use a laptop quite a bit that is 1280 by 800 pixels. So the laptop, I want it to use all of the CSS up here. But when I go to a larger screen, like the iMac I'm on right now, or an even larger 27-inch iMac, I want it to change the size of the art box, so it goes up from 400 to 600. And I also want them, if I go smaller than that, this is if it's a max height of 768, that happens to be the width of an iPad. So if it goes below that, I want to change the order of my aside and my article. So if it goes smaller than this pixel size, which would be an iPad or a smaller tablet or a phone, notice that I've placed the aside, which used to be number 2, order 2 and order 1. I've switched that so the aside is number 1 and the article is number 2. I'll show you what that looks like. So this is what it's called responsive. So watch as I make this smaller, not only do all the photos stack up on each other, they go from 3 to 2 to 1, but when I get right up to that iPad width, this aside is going to jump up to the top. Instead of being second, it'll be first. Like you see here from the aside, now it's 1 and order is 2. It'll jump up to the top right there. You'll also see how my navigation stacks up on top of itself here. I'm not a huge fan of those little hamburger menus, so I like, if at all possible, to keep my navigation just stacked up in one area. So it looks the same no matter what device it looks on, or people look at it on, and it's kind of consistent. So as it stacks up, now the aside goes from 2 to 1, and people can see the introductory photo here, and then they can scroll down and you can see the type, and all of the images just go in line. And then you see the footer at the bottom again. Now if I zoom way out and pretend this is a much, much larger screen, you will see all these images go from 3 to 4, and then to 5, 6. So if I have a really, really wide screen, you can see the way I have the HTML set up in the CSS. This all just stacks on top of each other and flows. See when I get really small there, because the screen is still really big, it won't push that aside up to the top. If I set it back to the way it's supposed to be, the size, then it will do that. So that's kind of the gist of web design, how you have an HTML file controlled and styled by a CSS style, and you have a nice neat folder that has your HTML pages in the main root folder, and you have your CSS in the main root folder, and then in your images folder you have everything that you use in here. So in the next video we'll get into changing and adjusting the website, and putting your own photos in there and putting your own picture in there and changing some of the headlines. Thank you.